we're advancing 3 new approaches to strengthen arms control and decrease nuclear risks in this changing nuclear age. First, we have stated our willingness to engage in bilateral arms control discussions with Russia and with China without preconditions. And before I jump into this, let me just step back and say that without preconditions does not mean without accountability. We'll still hold nuclear powers accountable for reckless behavior, and we'll still hold our adversaries and competitors responsible for upholding nuclear agreements. For example, the United States will continue to notify Russia in advance of ballistic missile launches and major strategic exercises in line with pre-existing nuclear agreements. But yesterday, we adopted lawful, proportionate, and reversible countermeasures in response to Russia's violations of New START, including suspending our day-to-day notifications to Russia that are a part of the treaty. These steps will help guarantee that Russia does not receive benefits from a treaty they refuse to abide by, and that the principle of reciprocity, a key tenet of strategic arms control, is upheld. It will also demonstrate to Russia the benefits of returning to full compliance, including once again receiving detailed information regarding our nuclear forces, a conversation we continue to press for directly with Russian officials. But while claiming to suspend New START, Russia has also publicly committed to adhere to the treaty's central limits, indicating a potential willingness to continue limiting strategic nuclear forces through 2026. We agree. It is in neither of our countries' interest to embark on an open-ended competition in strategic nuclear forces, and we're prepared to stick to the central limits as long as Russia does. And rather than waiting to resolve all of our bilateral differences, the United States is ready to engage Russia now to manage nuclear risks and develop a post-2026 arms control framework. We are prepared to enter into those discussions. Now, the type of limits the United States can agree to after the treaty expires will, of course, be impacted by the size and scale of China's nuclear buildup. That's why we're also ready to engage China without preconditions, helping ensure that competition is managed and that competition does not veer into conflict. It's our hope that among the topics on the table for diplomatic discussion, Beijing will be willing to include substantive engagement on strategic nuclear issues, which would benefit the security of both of our countries and the security of the entire world. Next, the United States is willing to engage in new multilateral arms control efforts, including through the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, the P5, the United States, Russia, China, the United Kingdom, and France. We're under no illusions that reaching risk reduction and arms control measures in that setting will be easy, but we do believe it is possible. And as you all know, 4 of the 5 nuclear powers are, with some exceptions that I just mentioned, already de facto committed to some transparency and restraint in their nuclear policies and postures. The US, the UK, and France have also all demonstrated their commitments repeatedly to responsible behavior. And some of the P5 have nuclear agreements with each other. For example, the US and Russia have a ballistic missile launch notification agreement with each other, which I mentioned before. So do Russia and China. But these existing agreements are limited and piecemeal. We can do more. The P5 provides an opportunity to manage nuclear risk and arms race pressures through a mix of dialogue, transparency, and agreements. For example, formalizing a missile launch notification regime across the P5 is a straightforward measure that is simply common sense. It's a small step that would help reduce the risk of misperception and miscalculation in times of crisis, and one that could potentially build more momentum towards further measures to manage nuclear risks and arms racing. From maintaining a human in the loop for command, control, and employment of nuclear weapons, to establishing crisis communications channels among the P5 capitals, to committing to transparency on nuclear policy, doctrine, and budgeting, to setting up guardrails for managing the interplay between non-nuclear strategic capabilities and nuclear deterrence. These are all areas where we could take further steps in a multilateral context working among the P5. This leads to my third and final point. The United States will step up to help set the norms and shore up the values of the new nuclear era. We're already making some progress, including across every major multilateral body that seeks to limit nuclear or WMD risks. The Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference, the Conference on Disarmament, the Chemical Weapons Convention, the Biological Weapons Convention. Across all of these forums, we're leading results-based discussions, and we're ensuring that our frameworks are fit for the threats we face today and tomorrow. For example, the fielding of weapons based on emerging technologies will create new, interconnected, and unpredictable escalation pathways. So we're working to establish new guardrails, especially in space and cyberspace. And of course, with the advent of artificial intelligence, this entire picture only becomes more complex and challenging and requires the new kinds of approaches that I've been describing throughout the speech. The approach that we are looking at takes into account technologies and tools that could complicate a potential nuclear conflict, like hypersonic weapons, like AI-enabled systems. And as the president often says, we're making sure that we're leading not just by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. That's why we've committed to not conduct destructive, direct descent anti-satellite missile testing. And we're encouraging our allies, partners, and competitors to do the same.